And of course, this year, with Israel still reeling, fighting, dare I say, recovering from the onslaught and kidnappings of October 7th, this traumatized nation seeks some basis to grasp the moment we're in. Many drawing direct lines to the Holocaust, not to the helplessness, per se, of the early 1940s, but to the level of hate and unrestrained violence wrought upon us that dark day not long ago. I will discuss all of today's relevant angles with our expert guests, but first, to bring our viewers abroad in particular into this uniquely Israeli moment, here's what we all experienced this morning at 10 a.m. as the country stood for the annual national moment of silence. Jarring as those sirens might be for any of us who have lived through the bombardments of the last years, it's a powerful national event every year, as it is, when that siren brings the country to a standstill in public places, etc. But at the same time, in Europe, the place where it all happened, the March of the Living is taking place, and a lot of dignitaries, including President Herzog of Israel, who was there at Auschwitz today. Listen in.
With a broken heart, I remind all of us that after the Holocaust, we swore never again. Today, while we are here, the souls of dozens of Jews are once again yearning in a cage and thirsting for water and freedom, while 59 of our brothers and sisters are in the hands of murderers, terrorists, in Gaza, in a terrible and horrific crime against humanity. The return of the hostages is a universal human imperative, and I call from here, from this holy place, to the entire international community to mobilize and put an end to this terrible humanitarian crime.
And while inclement weather, the rain, has brought a halt to the main ceremonies there today around March of the Living. We'll cover the ones that took place up to now. Former Israeli hostages, also who were kidnapped on October 7th, took part in the March of the Living today at the Nazi concentration camps of Auschwitz-Birkenau, alongside Holocaust survivors. Now, just one of the visible lines being drawn this year between the Holocaust and the recent atrocities. Now, among them is Eli Sharabi, who has appeared on the world stage displaying really a superhuman resolve since his release from Gazan captivity, only to discover that his wife and daughter had been killed on October 7th. But here's Sharabi at Auschwitz with March of the Living.
We will never forget or forgive the horrors of the Holocaust. Yet every representative who has come here from the October 7th delegation is a triumph of light for the Jewish people and a reminder that the Jewish people will exist for eternity. The Jewish people sanctify life, not death. We come here with the hope that the covenant between the state and its citizens will be honored, that all the hostages will return, both the living to their homes and the fallen to a proper burial.
Now, in the studio, joining us to begin the program today is Ambassador Avi Pazner, former Israeli ambassador to France and Italy, and the former world chairman of the Keren Hayesod, the United Israel Appeal. Ambassador, always good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Also, Dr. Robert Rosette, senior historian at Yad Vashem. Appreciate you coming back. I know we've had meaningful discussions on previous specials here. Ambassador, first of all, there's really an element of diplomacy taking place today. These groups coming from abroad, all converging on Auschwitz, showing up in Poland for the events of today. If you can comment on the importance, the ongoing importance of efforts like March of the Living, and on top of that, something that maybe a lot of our viewers don't know, that most Israeli high school juniors in their third year of high school go on these organized student trips to the concentration camps. You know, I think that gives a foundation of a lot of the Israeli ethos around this. Describe, the importance of these two things, of going there in person.
You know, today, especially in these years, that we face a new wave of anti-Semitism, a lot of criticism of Israel, also from friendly nations. Yeah. It is very, very important to remember that we went through one Holocaust last century, and that we don't want to go through another one this century. And I think that what happened October the 7th, for us, it reminded us the Holocaust, the Shoah. Yeah. I am not sure that this is understood abroad. Say, okay, you had a terrible attack, you had 1,200 people killed, it's terrible. But they don't make the connection between that attack and the Holocaust. And here I see, personally, a continuous effort to wipe out further Jewish people. Now, the state of Israel by Hamas and other terrorist organizations. So I see here a consistent effort to wipe out the Jewish people and their state. And this is why it is so important, this annual event, commemorating the Shoah, and going to Auschwitz and Birkenau and other camps, and showing that we are there, we are here. And you know that I saw
an element beyond educating, young people. It's about showing presence. It's about showing up and showing that you're living.
Yeah, we are here. I mean, they tried to eliminate us, and we are still here. And this is, I think, the main message that we convey to the world. And it has become, I think, a world event.
Yeah.
I saw, I see television from all over Europe. They show what's happening today. This is the importance.
We see a lot of, Dr. Rosette, a lot of the survivors, and I think from the latest surveys I could find that there's somewhere around just over 200,000 living survivors worldwide today, and I think spread over some 90 countries. And these are obviously people in their late 80s, 90s. Are we in a critical moment? And I think, maybe we've discussed this for, many years now about the sort of dwindling number of survivors fading and connecting them with the young generation today. Is this a critical element of preserving the history of focusing on these living survivors and bringing in the young people like the ambassador is talking about to the concentration camps?
Well, we are at a critical moment for many reasons, but one of them is because we're 80 years after the end of the war. And that's already a long enough time that many people no longer have what we could call living memory. They may not have a grandparent anymore to talk to them. They don't have survivors who they know who are their neighbor upstairs anymore, as many people might have had around the world, the person who owned the store around the corner from you. So I think that is a big change that's going on. And one of the things that's so important about the visits and about a day like this is trying to nurture the identification, because you must teach people information, but you have to get hearts and minds. So getting the hearts has a lot to do with being on site, seeing places. And with the survivors, again, getting older, and the survivors now speaking to us, mostly having only been children, and often only have very fragmented memories, we've certainly gone through a change. And again, we who deal in education, we've been talking and trying to meet this challenge for quite a while now. And I hope that we're doing it by bringing in survivors' voices wherever we can in the educational material.
How do worldwide events, just to add to this, in terms of those efforts, you've been working this for decades, the efforts to continue the education. How does, what we see today, what kind of feedback is it for you in terms of the efforts that have been made to educate the world?
Well, again, there's a lot of things. There was a misunderstanding among many people that the Holocaust education could inoculate people against anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, that's not true. It's more of an issue of it's necessary but not sufficient.
Okay. Yeah,
so it doesn't mean we don't stop Holocaust education. It just means that we need more than that when we're discussing anti-Semitism. On the other hand, we know that around the world, less and less young people know about the Holocaust.
We'll get into that. I've got some stats to bring out here in our chat in a minute, but I want to bring another element to this as we're talking about March of the Living and the events today at Auschwitz, and along with the groups, as we've discussed, mostly Jews from around the world that attend the annual March of the Living. I-24 News' Emily Francis is there with a special delegation composed primarily of Muslims visiting the concentration camps. Here's more from Emily.
An emotional experience, to say the least, and one with so much complexity and so many layers to it. As many as 300,000 people are expected to descend on the Auschwitz death camp today for the annual March of the Living. Behind me, you see a sea of people wrapped in Israeli flags, which was hardly the case when 1.1 million Jews were brought right here to this death camp and murdered. Now, keep in mind that Auschwitz was only a few years. It was only open for a few years. And in that short time, they managed to kill 1.1 million people. I am here as part of a delegation called Sharaka, which means partnership in Arabic. It's an Israeli nonprofit starting right around the time of the Abraham Accords, as it's meant to bring Muslims from different countries, Jews together to find a way to foster bridges of tolerance, understanding, education, to come together in a way to try to do whatever is possible to try to bring people together around the world. Among the people on this delegation is a young man from Yemen, someone who grew up in Yemen, that he said everybody from a very young age is taught that they basically have to kill people in Israel. That is the Kool-Aid that they are drinking from a very young age. Take a listen.
In Yemen, we learned that the Holocaust never happened. And by the way, if it did happen, it would have been good. This is the main narrative about the Jewish people in the Holocaust. It's Jewish propaganda that didn't happen, but actually we should have actually killed all of them. Not just 6 million, all of them. So for me to be here and experience everything is really hard, but Israel is the hope for the Middle East.
So here we are in a world with so much anti-Semitism after 80 years that Auschwitz was liberated. So much anti-Semitism in the wake of October 7th, so much vitriol on all sides, so much hate in the world. And that's why organizations like this and having these annual events, which brings to people from all different cultures, all different religions, to really understand that the Holocaust happened, when so many people around the world are taught to deny the Holocaust happened. Similarly, among those that are here is a gentleman, African-American Muslim from Texas, who is also a big advocate with African-Americans creating understanding. Here's what he had to say about what we share in common.
We have to work that we can show the people that we can live together in harmony and peace. And the way we have to do that is show them that we are working together to bring that about. And visiting here is just one of the sites that makes you look at what the people had to go through and then try to find some kind of place in this human world to live.
So we will continue this journey, the March of the Living, set to start in a couple of hours, which is about a 2-mile walk from Auschwitz to Birkenau. Again, it was the March of the Death, March of Death, and that's why it is called March of Living, because here we are commemorating what happened. We're looking to the future. We're not staying in a state of being victimized. It's about survival, hope, moving forward, and trying to make this world a better place. Reporting from Auschwitz, Emily Francis, back to you in the studio.
Again, appreciate Emily bringing us that perspective. And Ambassador, what's your thoughts on this? I mean, this is a unique group that she's there with, Emily's there with, this group of Muslims. I mean, you mentioned this being more and more of an international event from all over Europe. You know, how does it strike you? Is this an important step in terms of keeping them educating?
I would hope it is an important step. But I must say it's rather the exception and not the rule.
It's definitely the exception.
I must say, because what I'm hearing sometimes from Arab side is, why didn't Hitler finish the job? I mean, you hear more about that than this wonderful delegation. Really, I say this is something which is unusual to see, but to my great regret, David, it doesn't reflect the sense in the Arab or in the Muslim community in the world. I'm sorry. And here again, you have this element of education. I mean, if those pictures of this Arab delegation, I don't know if they are shown in the Arab world. I'm not sure that they will show them. But if they were shown in the Arab world, this would make a difference, you know?
And Nicole Zedek, our correspondent and host here, joining us now in the studio. Nicole, you've been attending. We were talking just before we got into this piece with Emily about the importance of the firsthand storytelling, of connecting, to the primary source of what took place in those days, and the opportunities are dwindling for us. But the city of Tel Aviv, and I think other municipalities around the country, have put on this memories in the living room, if I'm translating it right. Memories in the salon.
Across the country, I want to say around the world, actually. Okay. It's called Zikaron B'Salon, which means memories in the living room.
Tell us about it. I mean, what did you experience there?
So I was in Jerusalem earlier today in a Zikaron B'Salon event that was put on also alongside the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, and they had a group of some 20 different ambassadors and representatives of different countries all around the world to hear a first-hand experience from a Holocaust survivor, Wanda Albinsky. She's 88 years old. When she was only 5 years old already, she was living in the Warsaw ghetto. the story that she told, it is truly one of all of the survivors, and that is just so remarkable. But to sit this close, that's what's something so amazing about this Zikaron Barcelona. It's the fact that it's in a living room. You're not in a hall. You're not in a lecture.
You can't substitute that.
You're sitting face by face. In person. Exactly. Right. And so Wanda's story, I'll tell you just very quickly, and there is a short documentary that I would recommend our viewers watch. It's called Nobody Told Me. And this is the fact that her son did not find out that his mother was a Holocaust survivor until he was 20 years old. Wanda was in the Warsaw ghettos when she was just a toddler, her and her 3 other siblings. And her mother, Dr. Helena Rothstein, she was a doctor at one of the hospitals in the Warsaw ghetto. She was working with these patients all the time. And she had the opportunity to smuggle her children, her 4 kids, out of the ghetto, leaving them behind, staying here with her patients and giving her kids a chance to live, to survive, just hope.
Wow.
So she did, and Wanda and her siblings, they were smuggled out. Wanda went to a Catholic family. She was then a few years later actually baptized. She went to a Catholic school, and Wanda said even her Catholic parents that took her in, they didn't treat her as Catholic or Jewish. She was just a Polish girl, and she keeps that identity with her still today, and I think that's what's so remarkable. And it wasn't until so many years later, something that we saw for the 40 years after the Holocaust,
it's starting to open up.
People kept these stories hidden inside, and so when her son, Luke, finally found out in the 1990s the story of his mother, he said, you have to share this story, and people need to know exactly how this happened. And I was speaking to her while we were there. She's not from Israel, but she came here to share her story, talk about the experience, and especially being here in Israel during a state of war. Following the October 7th massacre, I asked her, as someone who experienced these atrocities firsthand, sometimes we do hear this comparison, right, David? October 7th and the Holocaust, you can draw some of the similarities. I want viewers to take a listen to what she had to say.
I cannot understand why is such enormous animosity against the Jews. You know, it is for me completely difficult to understand. Why? You don't attack anybody, you're not armed. And again, when war comes, you are the first which are attacked, which your people are killed, and your country is in danger. Why?
So clearly still grappling with this pain, and while we can draw similarities, something that I think was very vocal at this event was, although you can draw similarities, one of the stark differences is now there is the State of Israel. Following the Holocaust, even after the liberation, people were just starting to rebuild their lives again, versus now there's the State of Israel. And despite all of the pain that we have been through over these past 18 months, people, even the freed hostages, they get to come back to their home, to a community, to things that these Holocaust survivors did not have following the end of World War II. And I think that was a very strong message that I left walking away from the Zikaron Barcelona event.
It's, I think, a critical point, that the different universe we're in today than as a people than in the 40s, in a position of power versus helplessness, the outbreak of the Holocaust. And Dr. Rosette, I think we need to bring in this element of, and we touched on it here, that, you know, post-October 7th, the nation, the people grasping, looking for some, you know, basis to even take in such an event, and so many comments, so many minds going back to the Holocaust as sort of, you know, we hear this is the worst, you know, day for the Jews since the Holocaust. So many seeking some sort of foundation to digest the issues. But, you know, and I'd even go as recently as last night, Prime Minister Netanyahu comparing in a direct way Hamas to the Nazis. How does it strike you, this comparison, this sort of moment we're in where we're struggling to connect the dots on these horrible atrocities?
Well, on the level of those that went through it, that for them, it reminded them of the Holocaust, made them feel like they were going through something similar to the Holocaust. You can't argue with what people were feeling. That's what they were feeling. Yeah. Now, if you talk to somebody who's dealing with this analytically, trying to understand what was happening,
obviously different scale.
Right, then we want to stay away from simplistic comparisons. This is a different situation for many reasons. There are some things that are similar: the tremendous hatred of Hamas towards the Jews and their murderousness. But the whole context is very different. We're in a different place, as you mentioned. So we have to be careful about simplistic things.
Are the survivors bristling at this? You know, are there people today sort of speaking out even against, like, hey, we shouldn't be discussing these events in the same sentence?
Yeah, survivors, I've heard less voices, although I have heard some survivors say be careful about comparisons. But people who are, in education and research, and we at Yad Vashem, we've been saying all along that you have to be very careful about, again, making simplistic parallels between things.
Belittling
the Holocaust. You always look at similarities and differences about situations. That's how we learn. If we put everything in one pot, then we don't understand anything.
Thank you for now. Nicole Zedek, thanks for bringing with us a powerful element of the story. I know that's played out nationwide. There's a lot of these stories, the memories in the living room, in the salon. So thanks for bringing us that, Nicole. And we move on here a bit in the special with the Holocaust becoming a distant memory, as we've discussed here, coinciding with an alarming rise in Holocaust denial or simply ignorance around the world. It's more important now than ever before to commemorate those atrocities so history doesn't repeat itself. That's why for the last 14 years, Zikaron Salon, as we touched on here, these memories in a living room has given Holocaust survivors or their descendants a chance to tell their story. And as Nicole just brought us one, our Joe Brown went to another one of these events, takes us there.
How do you keep the memories of your family, even the most traumatic stories, alive?
My grandfather, Yitzhak, was a Holocaust survivor.
Yitzhak Lewkowicz was born in Poland in 1921. He grew up in Wielun in southern Poland, in a suburb with a large Jewish community, a community which was largely decimated during World War II. Lewkowicz was captured and taken to concentration camps.
When the war occurred, he was in Wielun, but he went through a lot of labor camps and concentration camps. We know part of them Lodz, Auschwitz, Birkenau. He was part of death walks. Someone asked him, do you believe in the good of humankind? And I was like, what's that question? Like, I was like thinking about it and like, who asks such thing? And then my grandfather said, I never stopped believing in the goodness of humankind because due to the goodness of humankind, I was survived.
After years of pain, trauma, and suffering, he vowed to never let that happen to the Jewish people ever again. Subsequently, he moved to the British Mandate of Palestine and joined the military group the Palmach, a precursor to the IDF, and fought for Israel's independence.
He grew up in a Hasidic family, as a religious, but he knew that we need a home. And after what happened in Europe, he knew better than before that the Jews need a home.
Yitzhak died at the age of 97 in 2018. He was one of the last few living people who were adults during the Holocaust and part of a group that is rapidly dwindling. According to a study published this week by the New York-based Claims Conference, there are just under 250,000 Holocaust survivors still alive, with a median age of 87. The study also estimates that 70% of these people will be dead within the next decade. So, with first-hand accounts soon to be a product of history, how can the next generation learn about the atrocities of the Holocaust and ensure that it will be never again?
Until his last day, he was giving testimonies, and I will give his testimony.
Since 2011, an initiative called Zikaron Basalon, translated as Memories in a Living Room, has allowed Holocaust survivors and their descendants to retell their stories to a newer audience. In the run-up to Israel's Holocaust Memorial Day, the Tel Aviv municipality set up dozens of events in a handful of languages, where people are invited to listen to and discuss the horror stories that Jews in the mid-20th century had to deal with.
And the Germans were capturing people on the street. They didn't care if you're Jew, if you're Pole, they didn't care whoever they wanted, and they just shoot him.
Before his passing in 2018, Yitzhak and his granddaughter Elil took part in multiple Zikaron Basalon events. Now, the baton has been passed to her.
For me, I felt like it's the will of my grandfather. It was never written as a will, but I felt like it was stronger in me. That's the thing I was brought up to do. Nowadays, I speak. I'm an audience person, so I feel like I have this tool also to talk and give a story.
On the eve of Holocaust Memorial Day in Israel, Elil addressed a group of English speakers in Lillenblum 7, a Tel Aviv municipality-run Hebrew language school, telling a story from a not-too-distant history that she grew up hearing. Her intention, as is the intention of dozens of people taking part in these events, is to educate and to pass her grandfather's story onto the next generation. But not only is she keeping Itzhak's story alive, she is also keeping his personal dream alive.
He used to tell me, every child I have and every grandchildren I have, that's my revenge at the Nazis, because they didn't want me to live. And for me, every grandchildren and a child, it's to show them I'm still here, I'm still standing.
Again, powerful events there. These memories in the salon, so important for those of us today trying to get that firsthand exposure to the history. Now, a third of young adults in the UK apparently are unable to name Auschwitz or any of the other concentration camps or places where the worst crimes of the Holocaust were committed. That's according to recently published studies. Now, other growing gaps in knowledge were apparent, especially among those aged 18 to 29, part of major international surveys in countries including the US and the UK. Now, those involved in the research still claim that it showed that Holocaust education is having a meaningful impact. However, there was particular concern about the apparent spread of Holocaust denial, distortion, disinformation on primarily social media today, platforms such as X and Facebook. But for further discussion on all these things, we're joined now by Noemi Lopian. She's a Holocaust educator, and appreciate you being with us, Noemi, joining us in the studio today. First, I want to jump on this. I know you're the founder of HolocaustMatters.org. Let me make sure I got that right. Tell us about that effort. What goes into it?
That effort started after publishing my father's book, The Long Night, which he wrote himself very soon after the war, unusual as a young man whilst he was studying medicine and dentistry. And it reads like a reportage, a film, and describes his experiences in 7 labor camps and concentration camps.
He opened up to this in the years just after the war, you're saying? This
yes.
wasn't something buried in the memories, brought out 40 years later. That's fascinating.
Correct. It was fascinating, and you literally feel like you're sitting on his shoulder and living it.
Wow.
It's a very frank, fresh, vivid, objective account of his time there, and explains the devilish act that man is capable of doing to fellow man.
Both your parents are survivors, right?
Both my parents, yeah. My mother, you're quite right, mustn't just focus on my father. My father was Polish, and my mother was French. Her experiences were different, but both experiences by the devilish hands of the Nazis. My mum was a little girl of 10 when she was arrested, imprisoned and questioned at gunpoint by the Gestapo, asking, "Are you Jewish?" when they and wanting the parents' address to deport the parents to the concentration camps.
It's unthinkable. I mean, I know this is the theme of the day, but my goodness. Where do in terms of your motivation translating your father's book, just in recent years, to realizing more people needed to be exposed to this? I mean, that it should be out there for more to take in?
I feel everybody has to know. My father wrote it so the world should understand what bestial acts man could do to man. And I feel everybody has to be a witness to it. Today, the world hasn't learnt, but we must try and educate. We can't give up to educate. It's our only means. And I feel if the world was educated across board, and by education, I feel that you can't just, what I'm doing now to your listeners and to you, just speak to people, but you actually have to involve people, involve the students. They have to give of themselves, and then we enmesh and we build that bridge of empathy. Holocaust cannot just be taught as a factual history lessons. It has to also challenge the students' emotional intelligence.
That's a great point. And Ambassador, I want to bring you in on this. From the top-down efforts, and both of you, Dr. Rosette as well, this sort of top-down efforts to, propagate this type of education worldwide, to expose people to it. Are there elements like it? Does it need to be more of this, personal feeling infused, Ambassador? What's your thought on, from a diplomatic angle, is there something missing today? Does it need to? I know it takes constant effort. I mean, that's a year after year effort to keep people knowledge.
I thought about something while our guests were speaking, that I myself, I don't realize it until today. I am a Holocaust survivor. I was a baby. I don't have any recollection, but I was born in Danzig, Gdansk, before the war. What were the chances of any baby surviving in 1939? And in Israel, there are only 2 of us, Zalman Shoval, who was ambassador to the United States, and myself. It's a good recipe to become ambassador. But I never thought about myself. And now, while they were speaking, I said, I don't realize. And I think if I myself don't think about myself as a survivor, what can we do for the world to know more? I was amazed to hear that 70% of, am I right
of
with
respondents? Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. In the UK, I mean, the UK fought and won the war. I mean, those are people whose grandparents fought the war. They don't know about it. So I think that Israel should make a big effort in order to help nation understand what happened, to understand so that it doesn't happen again. It's also important for them, not only for us.
Dr. Rosette, does it fall on the nation? Is it a top-level sort of prerogative for the state of Israel? Yad Vashem perhaps being the active arm of these efforts, likely for the state of Israel. But how much is it on the state to continue this, to push this, and not just that, to push back against the contentious stories, the disinformation, the fact that there are others out there telling another story. I mean, just to mention a few, I mean, these sort of challenges to history, whether you have the Palestinian Authority's efforts to, discount the enormity of the Holocaust, or Iranian efforts, to label it not a Jewish tragedy, to sort of sweep that aspect aside, or the wider Middle East, really kind of blaming Europe for the creation of Israel, for sort of dumping their problem on the Middle East. These are just perspectives that I know are out there that are being pushed. Is it incumbent on the state of Israel to sort of lead the charge to combat those things?
I think that many Jews around the world expect Israel to lead that charge. It's complicated, very complicated. But certainly Israel has to be deeply involved, and Israel is one of its most important roles in this is coordinating. There's so many different NGOs and groups that deal with Holocaust education, with fighting anti-Semitism. Sometimes I feel like we're a lot of separate militias all fighting a battle, but nobody's in charge. So Israel has an important role to play in that, and actually the Foreign Ministry has a very important role in that. They have a department that deals with it. It's a small department. It would be good if it was bigger, but they do try to work in that issue. But again, it's not for Israel alone. Israel's main job in this, one main job is coordinating. The other one is helping wherever they can to ensure that educational policies in given countries, that there's room for teaching about the Holocaust, teaching about Jews, teaching about anti-Semitism, and those things are fighting for all those other things that they want students to learn in a world where we know that it's not so easy to educate the way we've been educating. All of that's changing as well. So again, so many challenges out there. I just want to say that the idea of talking about people, of the individuals, that's been part of the educational work for many years now as well. It's really understood that if you don't talk on eye level to students about people, family, community, you're going to lose them. But you have to put that into context.
And just to cap this element of the story a bit, I mean, you grew up fairly internationally, I think, in Europe, various parts of Europe. And I wonder how, for your father, your parents, and yourself, about, the existence of the State of Israel, the growing prominence of the State of Israel in this subject matter throughout your lifetime. How did that come into the story? How was that a factor, or was it a factor?
It was a factor. I grew up in Munich, in Germany, and the first time I went to Israel was at the age of 16. Wow. But we had a Hebrew teacher, actually she was Israeli, and she imbued us together with my parents with a love for Israel. So when I came to Israel for the first time with Ezra Camp from England, I kissed the ground, and I had the most amazing time touring the country. It was a country for young people. We met other young people. I forgot all the instructions my mother gave me, and I just had the time of my life, just mixing and meeting. And you know what? I realized that growing up in Germany, even though I didn't know about the Shoah, neither of my parents told me about the Shoah. I lived with the weight of being Jewish. I grew up with my parents saying, don't draw attention to yourself.
In those post-Holocaust years, the immediate, decades out of the Holocaust, this was how you had
don't draw attention to yourself. Although I went to a non-Jewish secondary school, and it was Pesach this time of year, and my mother said, bring in the matzahs, show I was the only Jewess in the village together with my sister, show them what Pesach is. But that took courage, and you didn't want to be the other or different. It was a school of 1,800 pupils.
My goodness. Thank you all for contributing so far. Ambassador Avi Posner, I know I need to say a goodbye to you. I do for now, but thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you for having me.
We bring other elements in here. We touched on them already. October 7th, It's sparked a surge in anti-Semitic incidents worldwide, but despite the seemingly bleak reality, an emerging hatred against Jews, the annual anti-Semitism report, published by Tel Aviv University, actually gives us a glimmer of hope, as our Lynn Flachmeyer has the story.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
The annual anti-Semitism report of the Tel Aviv University for 2024 has been released, and despite the rise in anti-Semitism worldwide, it seems like the anti-Semitic wave is calming. The report says, around the world, levels of anti-Semitism remain significantly higher compared to the period before October 7. However, contrary to popular belief, the report's findings indicate that the wave of anti-Semitism did not steadily intensify due to the war in Gaza and the humanitarian disaster there. The peak was in October-December 2023, and a year later, a sharp decline in the number of incidents was noted almost everywhere. The sad truth is that anti-Semitism reared its head at the moment when the Jewish state appeared weaker than ever and under existential threat. The report presents an alarming rise in Australia. A record 1,700 anti-Semitic incidents were recorded in 2024 compared to 1,200 in 2023. A moderate rise was recorded in the US, 344 complaints on anti-Semitic incidents in 2024 compared to 325 in 2023 and 264 in 2022 in New York alone. Another report by the Anti-Defamation League recorded over 9,000 anti-Semitic incidents across the United States in 2024. This represents a 5% increase from the over 8,000 incidents recorded in 2023, which is a 344% increase over the past 5 years and an almost 900% increase over the past 10 years. It is the highest number on record since ADL began tracking anti-Semitic incidents 46 years ago. Canada, Argentina, Switzerland, Brazil and Spain also saw a slight rise in anti-Semitism. However, in several countries, anti-Semitic incidents decreased in 2024 compared to 2023. Despite a rise in the number of physical assaults on Jews in France, over 1,500 anti-Semitic incidents were recorded in 2024 compared to over 1,600 in 2023. In the UK, over 3,500 incidents were recorded compared to over 4,000 in 2023. And in Germany, in 2024, around 5,000 incidents were recorded compared to over 5,500 in 2023. The report also examined the work of law enforcement and found that only negligible percentage of complaints about anti-Semitic hate crimes, in some cases less than 10%, led to arrests. And so, as Israel commemorates the Holocaust, despite a small decline in anti-Semitic incidents in 2024 in comparison to the previous year, it remains evident that there's still a long way to go in combating anti-Semitism worldwide.
Staying with that topic and still with our guests in the studio here, frame it, Dr. Rosette, as a certain climate that we're surrounded by in right now when it comes to discussions about the state of Israel, of course, but seems to be touching on Jews across the diaspora, that there's a real climate out there that has shifted dramatically in just the last 2 years. And I wonder, from your perspective, if the events we're seeing worldwide, this sort of wider discussion that seems to follow around Israel everywhere right now is giving traction to Holocaust revisionism, to some of the worst stories being told about us, or untrue as they may be, the disinformation. Is that world growing? Is it gaining traction amid what we're seeing worldwide right now?
Well, of course, there's no question that since October 7th, there's been a growth in the anti-Semitism we're seeing on the surface. Right. The roots were there. So apparent, so visible now. Right, the roots were there, and all of the things we're seeing now certainly were there before, but they came out so much stronger after October 7th, and including the issues of Holocaust distortion and denial.
Is this a target now for many of the naysayers? Are they starting to grasp towards the Holocaust as another thing to be bringing out in this anti?
Well, again, I think what happened is that the people who were speaking against the Holocaust or trying to say that it's an invented subject or that the Jews manipulated for their own good, and those that distort the Holocaust for their own political reasons, whatever they are, they feel that the world's much more open to them now. And I think that they're speaking much more clearly and loudly than they were before, and there's more people who are willing to listen to them than there were before. I don't know if there's a rise in the exact number of people who are putting this forth. I don't think anybody's made a study like that. But it was a problem. It continues to be a problem. a thing we need to address all the time. And again, it's an ongoing thing. And some of it's not really related to October 7th. What happened just recently now when we saw that one of the heads of the main commando that was murdering the Jews of Latvia, Herbert Sukhorst, was rehabilitated by a court the other day. And then that has really nothing to do with October 7th. Those are things that have been going on since the former communist countries became non-communist, dealing with their past, and there's been a great tendency to whitewash all kinds of people in those countries. That's something we've been seeing. So those things we're dealing with as well, and they're continuing.
You know, that strife, was particularly with Poland. I know it sort of marred this day in recent years, or a series of years where it seemed to be a bit tainted by this Poland revisionism, you know, historical, giving their own perspective. Is this something we moved on from in terms of Israel and Polish relations? Is this still, you know, a sensitive issue when it comes to their?
Well, again, official relations is not my area, but in terms of the work we do in Poland with our fellow historians, the new government in Poland is much better than what was there.
Okay.
They're not as strident, but still the idea that some history hurts Polish honor in some way, disfigures Polish honor, defaces it in some way, is still there, and it's still strong in the public. The years where the previous government were there and were pushing this idea so strong, well, again, there was fertile ground to begin with, and it's still there. It's still an issue, but one can speak openly. One does not have to fear being put on trial for having said that Poles, many Poles around Poland were involved in the murder of the Jewish
subject. Right.
We can talk about these things more openly now in Poland, and I think there's hope for better cooperation between institutions like our own and institutions in Poland, but it's not yet a clear playing field, I would say.
And I want to get your thoughts in a moment. I want to bring in another element here, the Anti-Defamation League. Again, always prominent on Today. Let's listen to some of the latest.
I want to say that the good news is that anti-Semitism is learned and it can be unlearned. And this is what we have to do, to unlearn anti-Semitism. We have to fight in all spheres, be it educating Jewish students on how to respond to anti-Semitism, educating the general population on what is anti-Semitism, what is the Jewish community, how they can form allyship with Jews. We have to advocate with government, with countries, on how to not only have national plan to fight anti-Semitism, but actually how to implement them and the importance of implementing them. We have to train law enforcement to understand what an anti-Semitic hate crime is and how to respond to it from a law enforcement perspective, just so the citizen knows that it is being taken care of. So there's a lot of dimensions of fighting anti-Semitism, but one thing is very clear. Anti-Semitism is not a Jewish problem, nor it is a problem of the Jewish community. It is a problem of the countries and societies in which anti-Semitism exists. And it's an indicator for other sorts of hatred, and this is why we have to fight against it together.
Noemi, it seemed like a lot of this resonated with you, what you said. You know, how does that, you know, compare with your experiences in this field, you know, worldwide?
I think this lady was spot on, that you have to have a three-pronged approach to anti-Semitism. And I think in many countries, there are no consequences to acts of hate against people of Jewish faith or culture. This is what anti-Semitism is. There are no consequences, so people go ahead and do. And quite right, I do this always, the two-pronged approach of educating the young, but also having the support of the great and the good of the governments, because we see exactly that. And I also think Holocaust education, as sadly the survivors, as we see today, are getting older and fewer, we have to sadly move along with that and have more second, third generation educate, which will change, hence changing the structure, and also explaining more about the living Jews today, incorporating that, which in the UK in particular is Holocaust is taught in a bubble. You know, when they show the living Jews, it's pre-war pictures, very little about the people today, the survivors are old people. People can't really identify with all of that. So I think we have to change our programs slightly.
Dr. Rosette, another element, certainly in Europe, it's sort of the rise of far-right, you know, politics, at least the prominence, return to prominence of a lot of far-right, you know, political movements, parties, governments now in parts of Europe. Many of them have, in a way, pivoted to be pro-Israel. They've embraced the state of Israel. And I think we saw that on display, recently, a few weeks ago, at an anti-Semitism event in Jerusalem that had some controversy around it. But in terms of the embrace of the far right in Europe, are you concerned? What are your thoughts on that? This is a shifting landscape, and I'm curious, how you see this, the way that Israel's in the mix with this issue.
Well, it's very true that the landscape of anti-Semitism has become more complex, especially since we have this phenomenon of right up to even more extreme right that does sometimes support Israel in various international forums and in other ways, even supports the Jews in their country to a certain extent, even though some of those governments have Nazi, fascist, anti-Semitic backgrounds to them.
Like unabashed.
So it's very hard to figure out how to deal with that because there's the real politic of what they're doing, there's their background. I have to say I'm a great believer in something that Churchill said, that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the rest. So our democratic values are very important, and the right-wing governments that are taking away some of what democracy is all about, that's an issue. It's an issue way beyond the Jewish community. But it's certainly an issue for us. It's an issue about anti-Semitism as well. But again, these things are very problematic. And unfortunately, even if I would say you don't learn directly from history, history helps to inform you about some things. Again, the lack of sensibility about history and about what happened last time the far right dominated in Europe, where it went, and also what happens when the far left, the communists, dominated in the Soviet Union, what happens, why you need to have a different kind of society from neither of those extremes. And that is best for everybody, including for us Jews around the world.
No, I mean, how does that strike you? Again, as a child of Europe, is the best way to describe you here. But I mean, to see the shifting political landscapes, the affinity now growing for some of these groups and parties that were always there, but marginalized to the sidelines, not dominant in government like we see in Germany today, or France, or other countries across Europe. Does it particularly alarm you?
I find it alarming. I find any form of far alarming, be it far right, far left, the jihadi extremist, Muslim. That shows that there's an unrest and a lack of control, if that's the right word, in the world, in the various countries, because ideally the centrist type of governments, be it on the left or the right, should be satisfying the population, and they don't. So therefore people are looking for the far right. And I understand the support, why they support the Jews in Israel, and I understand why some Jews support the far right, because we're a threat from the Muslim extremists. But for me, like you described me exactly as a child of Europe, for me it's alarm bells. I don't like anything far at all, because like Dr. Razin said, we've seen in history, far doesn't bode us well.
No, certainly in a complex picture, as you highlight, Dr. Rosette. To continue a bit, we have another guest joining us now on International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Zaka International Commander Nachman Deckstein brings us the story of rescuing over 150 elderly Holocaust survivors from Ukraine that was at the outbreak of the war, evacuating them safely here to Israel through emergency flights. If I have it right, Nachman, it was every 10 days or so during the war's initial peak. So thanks for joining us from Ukraine, if I have that right. Tell us about this. I understand that this group of people included, for example, a 99-year-old woman, now 103, living in Israel. How did this effort begin? And I have to say, for our viewers who may not be familiar with Zaka, known for collecting of bodies, the preservation, the sanctity of victims of terror, and certainly October 7th played a prominent role. How did you get to Ukraine?
I live in Ukraine. First, hello, everybody. I live in Ukraine. We went out from Ukraine like everybody. And when we went out directly, we get phone calls from people that was not available to go by buses or something like this. Then every person that we took out went by ambulance with a doctor. One day before the doctor came to visit, to check every person like this from 99 year of 98 of 97 of this all ages. We need to check that they take the documents, take everything what they need. Then every day, one day before, we went to the person to see that she has everything prepared. In the morning, we took out every day maybe 2-3 ambulances to Moldova. it began like nothing. Now you say, you know, Zaka only for taking.
This is outside the box, I would argue. Unless correct me if I'm wrong.
Outside.
Right. Okay.
No. I think that this is something that we need to understand. Zaka is always there for every disaster. Okay. If we can keep lives, this is number one. This is the best. This is how I say. It was a happy end for me and my wife when we did it. It was a happy end. When we was the 7 October, it was not a happy end. But we did also a lot of good things. But with the Holocaust survivors, it was first. It's something that my whole life I was always very around this kind of people. They have so much what to say, but even when they doesn't talk, you can understand a lot of things from the eyes and from how they live and how everything what they do. You can understand everything. And this was something that came like I think it's like a present from God to give me and my wife and the family to do this, to bring so many Holocaust survivors to Israel, to the Holy Land, and also to bring them home. Like it was also very difficult for the Holocaust survivors to change. When you 99 years, change your house, change your life, change your language.
It's almost unthinkable, the challenges involved in this transition for them, right? This isn't just taking a visit to the grandkids. This is a move to another place. So remarkable challenges.
It's really crazy, but thanks God we did it. 150 Holocaust survivors we bring to Israel, and I think this is one of the big victory that I have in my life, that we have in the life, that what we did, not alone, together with all volunteers of Zaka, but it was in a lot of organizations that help us, but it was like an organization from every person. Take them out, see that he has this every small thing, like the person went out with one suitcase, everything he left over, like only a suitcase. And like this, people came. And in Moldova, we have a small hotel that we make like a hospital, doctors, nurses, every room. And like this, in the 10 days, normally they was in Moldova till we arranged the papers and everything. And they arrived to Israel by special flight, medical flights, doctors. I'm
curious about your perspectives on how this, you know, and it may be hard to explain in this moment of flux in Ukraine, but how the Jewish community there has shifted or changed. I mean, here you're talking about, you know, and I go back to the Holocaust. This is the people of Ukraine suffered arguably uniquely in the Holocaust. So to take these survivors, I mean, is this a big part of what was the Jewish community there? These people from this generation, have they, you know, largely removed? What does it do? What does it do to the population there? The Jewish community. You know.
The Jewish community, listen, if you ask me how many Holocaust survivors we have in Ukraine now, a lot, a lot. Not everybody was ready to go out.
Right.
You have a lot of people that doesn't want to go out, because I also understand them. Now what we are doing, we're trying to bring medication. We try to be in contact with the old Holocaust survivors. You have a lot in Ukraine that still didn't want to go out because they didn't want to change the whole life. Now what's going here? This
is a small group, in other words. In other words, this is a small group from the population of survivors in the community there in Ukraine.
In
is
Ukraine,
it still ongoing?
No, I don't think so.
No?
I don't think so. I don't think so. You have a lot of Jewish Holocaust survivors still living in Ukraine, but they don't want to live.
Is this still an ongoing effort? I mean, given the, you know, again, I know things aren't as intense as they were when you began this effort in some of these parts of Ukraine, but is this still an issue? Is Zaka still working on this, bringing people out who want to get out?
Listen, who wants to go out went out already. The people that staying now here, they need help here and not to go out because they doesn't want to go out. We are not taking people like by force. Everybody that wants to go out, we will try to give him the best, everything what we can do for him to bring him out in the best situation. But now we have not so many people that coming that wants to go out. Most wants to get what we can help in Ukraine itself.
Well, Nachman, it's an incredible story, and I have a major, venerance and just respect for Zaka, living in Israel for many years here. Obviously, we see some of the more grim side of your operations, but an incredible organization and a load of respect for all of you involved worldwide with those efforts. So thank you for bringing us the story of your efforts there at the beginning of the war.
Thank you very much. And again, I need to send it's a present from God that we get this present to bring out so many people from Ukraine to Israel.
No, fantastic. Obviously, that added element of bringing anyone to Israel. I applaud that. Nachman, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
I want to thank our guests as well as we run out of time here. Dr. Rosette and Nomi Lopian, thank you for being with us. Very interesting and eye-opening for me always to discuss the issues with you, and I know our viewers get a lot out of it as well. So thanks for joining. Again, to our viewers, this is annual Holocaust Remembrance Day in Israel. That's our hour-long specials running all the events. We'll continue covering all of that here today on I-24 News in the hours to come. I'm David Matlin. Thanks for joining.